Welcome to Hair and Horror, where I show you how to achieve different hairstyles while retelling my favorite spooky stories from the internet. Today's spooky story is titled The Unwanted Visitors. This happened a few years ago, but it still gives me an unsettling feeling when I think about it. The only reason I'm talking about it now is because I feel like it's been long enough since it happened. My wife and I had just moved into the suburbs from the city. We just had our third child, and between the baby, the toys, and the general chaos, the apartment we were in felt way too cramped. We found a nice house in a quiet, but most importantly, a safe neighborhood. The neighbors described it as the kind of place where you would feel fine leaving the doors unlocked. The house itself wasn't massive, but it was definitely a step up from the tiny space we'd previously been living in. One of the features that caught my wife's eye was the backyard. It had this beautiful, slightly overgrown garden with a few old statues scattered around it. They were weathered and a little eerie looking. I know it sounds weird, but my wife loved it. She said it gave our yard character. I was pretty indifferent, so I left everything as it was, statues and all. I figured it was less work for me, which I was never going to complain about. A few days after we moved in, I was looking out the window, taking in the yard, when I noticed something odd. One of the statues, an angel, was facing away from the house while all the others were facing toward us. It looked a little strange, and I could have sworn they all faced the same direction, but I really didn't know for sure. I didn't think much of it and just assumed I was misremembering things. The next morning, I looked out of the window again, and that's when I noticed it. Another statue had turned around again, facing away from the house, while the rest of them still faced toward us. This time, I knew something was up. I thought maybe it was my son. He was a little prankster back then, always up to something. But when I asked him, he just looked at me like I was nuts. I truly doubted he'd do something like that anyway. Either way, I knew something was going on, but I couldn't quite prove it. A few days went by without anything strange, and I started to relax. But then one evening, I looked out the window and my heart nearly stopped. This time, all of the statues were lined up in a row at the very edge of the house, just standing there. It was a freakish sight, like something out of a horror movie. I don't know, it sounds ridiculous, but part of me could feel like all of the eyes were staring at me. My breathing went shallow. I couldn't decide whether it was more scary or bizarre. I went outside to get a closer look, trying to make sense of it before opening the back door. I took a few nervous glances around the backyard to make sure no one was out there. It was daylight, but I was paranoid. Eventually, I worked up the courage to go open the door and inspect the statues. I went to lift one of them and immediately realized something. Those statues were heavy, way too heavy for one person to move alone. I couldn't even budge one of them on my own. As I was debating what to do, my wife walked outside. The look on her face told me she was just as freaked out as I was. She suggested maybe one of the other neighbors were messing with us, trying to scare the new people on the block. But that explanation literally made no sense. We had met all of our neighbors, and they seemed like fairly normal people. Then again, who in their right mind would do this to a young family with kids? This was harassment, not some harmless prank. We ended up calling the police, and, as you may expect, they couldn't do much. They suggested putting some security cameras up, but we didn't have the money for that. My wife and I did everything we could to hide the situation from our kids. Say what you will, but we didn't want to scare them. Nothing happened the next day, or the next. I speculated that maybe the cops had scared whoever was there away, which did track on many levels. So we tried to forget about it, even though neither of us really felt comfortable. I tried to assure myself that maybe my wife was right. Maybe it really was a prank. It didn't do much to calm my nerves, though. as I was always on edge looking out of the window. A few days passed without incident. I started thinking about the nightmare and how maybe it was actually over. And for the first time in a while, the house actually started to feel like home. I could not have been more wrong. It was a weekend. After some breakfast, I went outside to play in the yard with my kids, and that's when I saw it. Spray painted in big black letters on the back wall of our house were the words, "Go away." I nearly dropped my son when I saw it. Without thinking, I rushed my kids inside and told my wife to stay in the house with them. I don't know what came over me. I'm not that brave of a guy, but I started sprinting through the garden, screaming threats at whoever had vandalized the home. Adrenaline was coursing through my veins, and I was looking for a fight. However, no one was anywhere in my yard. I eventually gave up. As I was walking back toward the house, the adrenaline in me turned to outright fear. This was serious now. We called the police again. They took down another report, but without any leads, there wasn't much that they could do. They told me they'd make sure that a patrol officer was nearby, I guess, which was some sort of consolation. My wife, though, was twice as upset as I was, so I reassured her that we'd be okay, even though I was freaking out internally. That night, I was in the kitchen when I heard my wife scream from the living room. I ran in as she was standing by the window pointing outside. I looked and my stomach dropped. There were now 5 people standing in the backyard. They were dancing around in strange, jerky ways, almost like puppets. We just stood there and watched them, too shocked to even move. It was terrifying. I don't know what they were trying to accomplish, but it was the most disturbing thing I have ever seen in my life. After a few seconds, I snapped out of the haze. I grabbed the biggest kitchen knife we had. I screamed at my wife to call the police again, and while she was doing that, I ran out of the back door with a knife in my hand. I screamed like a clinically insane person, and I took one step toward them before instantly regretting it. There were 5 of them, and 1 of me. They could have been armed. Before anything else could happen, I turned around and ran back into the house. The knife must have scared them, though, because they stopped dancing instantly and ran deeper into the garden out of sight. I told my wife to run upstairs, find the kids, and hide, while I guarded the back door in case they tried to break in. By the time the police arrived, those people were gone. The police did a thorough search and they couldn't find any trace of them. But this incident was the last straw. I didn't care about the costs at this point. The next day, I bought and installed security cameras all around the home. My wife was hysterical for weeks after that, begging me to let us move somewhere else. I told her that if one more thing happens, that we would. But we'd probably be screwing ourselves financially if it came down to that point. Luckily, the cameras must have done the trick, because those people never returned, and we never had another incident occur on the property. The scariest thing, though, is that we still live in this same exact house, and we never got an explanation for what happened. I hope you guys enjoyed today's story. Please let me know what you think in the comments, and if you'd like more content like this, please follow.